Mel woke up bleary-eyed to the shaking and rattling of the life pod. What had happened? With a start, it all came back in a rush. The sinking of the graceful leap, the mad rush to evacuate, the panicked attack on herself. She looked down to the creature, still unconscious, clinging to her midsection. Hopefully it would be more rational when it awoke. There wasn't any room to struggle in a space meant for one. In the dim light of the pod, it was a pinkish colour. Where she could see its skin, it was covered in many brown dots and a fine layer of thin fur. This must be the species' juvenile camouflage. As another bit of turbulence shook the pod, Mel realised they must be on re-entry to a planet. No wonder the pod's automatic systems had woken her. Briefly, she wondered why the pod hadn't been picked up by a rescue ship. If the graceful leap never sent a distress call, then it must be more damaged than originally thought. The pink one shifted as it woke, just in time for both passengers to lose consciousness again as the life pod's deceleration thrusters failed and plummeted the rest of the way to the ground below. Ow! Why did everything hurt? Opening his eyes, Tom pushed his way out of the broken machine and fell straight into the mud. Mud? Land? He sat up and took in his surroundings. Puddle of mud, splintered trees, snow, and of course, the ruined life pod, steaming from the heat of re-entry. Not steam, fire. He leapt to his feet and forced open the broken pod for the second time in as many seconds. The ship crew member, or his co-pilot, was there, injured and unconscious. Tom grabbed the limp form under the arms and dragged them a short distance away to the tree line. He hoped he wasn't doing any more damage to his injuries. He knew nothing about alien first aid. He sat to catch his breath and watched as the growing fire consumed the pod. There had been no time to search it for a rescue beacon, first aid, or any sort of survival-related equipment for that matter. The next thing Tom noticed was the cold. Luckily he had grabbed his jacket after all. The fire was lovely and toasty, but would not last forever. The mud was starting to chill him, and so he spent some time doing his best to scrape himself clean. At least someone should see the plume of smoke, he thought to himself, if they hadn't seen the re-entry. For now, there was nothing to do but wait for rescue. Beltar had changed course as soon as he saw the Godrock fall from the sky. This week's hunt was going poorly anyway. There was little meat to chase this time of the year. But a Godrock! It would be hammered down to make expensive knives and spearheads, to be kept as a mark of status or traded for fame and fortune. His price of metal would yield times of plenty for generations to come, far superior to the stone flake everyone normally used. His name would live on in stories forever for his good fortune. Well, more so. He was already the tribe's best hunter. But Beltar had to find and claim it first. His landing was conveniently marked by the plume of smoke, right on the border of his tribe's territory. His hand clenched unconsciously on his spear. Others would also try to claim it with spear and fang if necessary. Such was its value. Beltar adjusted his furs around his torso and picked up his pace a little. The pink one had saved her. Walking on the cold snow with a broken arm was not the most pleasant of things, but if the human it had introduced itself as hadn't dragged her from the wreck of the pod, she would have burned to death. They had exchanged names and some small talk after splintering her arm, and Tom didn't seem to want to attack her again, so that was also a plus. But they hadn't been rescued, and half the day had passed by her reckoning. Even if the locator beacon had been destroyed in the fire, the life pod entering the atmosphere and the plume of smoke both should have been noted by the authorities. She looked up at the human while it climbed a nearby tree. Hopefully it could spot which direction the nearest road was so they could set out before nightfall. As the one with the fewest broken limbs, it had volunteered to be the one to make the climb. But she still felt bad for letting the young do the work, when she should be the one looking after it. Tom ungracefully part climbed, part fell his way back to ground level. The reality they faced was not good. The bad news was it looked like wilderness in every direction, as far as he could see. No cities, no towns, no roads to civilization. Wherever they were, it was sparsely populated, if at all. No sign of the other escape pods either. Theirs must have been separated from the cluster. There would be no rescue. They would have to manage something themselves for the time being. The alien Mel took this harsh truth in silence. The good news was there seemed to be a river nearby. This meant drinking water, and if there was any civilization to be found in this frozen forest, it would probably be more likely to be along the river somewhere. They had no supplies, nothing salvageable from the pod, just the clothes on their backs and each other. At least Mel said her species could tolerate the cold well enough, even if she wasn't fond of it. Pulling up the collar of his jacket, Tom led the way. What in the nine hells was it? Beltar looked over the charred, melted and steaming remains of the life pod in wonder and awe. This god rock was made of strange materials, but none of it identifiable as precious metal. Advanced concepts like plastic hybrid weave and ceramic alloy were far beyond his people's understanding, and would be for many more thousands of years. He examined the remains of the passenger compartment at Spearpoint, slowly managing to comprehend that the void meant something that went here was missing. Drat, others must have beaten him to his prize. Beltar began to look through the melted snow for clearer tracks. He would follow the would-be thieves all the way back to their village if he had to. Must claim the metal for his tribe at all costs. The tracks he did find were other. Two sets of tracks he did not recognize were headed to the river. They were larger feet than his, sank deeper into the snow than his, and were farther apart than his. They were not of his people, or each other. He had been robbed by monsters. It didn't matter what they wanted the metal for. It wasn't their lands to take from. But he would have to be cautious. Any unknown creature was dangerous. Careful to remain stealthy, Beltar began his pursuit.